Hi guys, so today I'm going to demonstrate on how to integrate a .NET Core API with a Monday.com board so that you can get the data which is there in your Monday.com board and save it in a SQL database. So recently I have got a requirement where I had to save the information that is there in a Monday.com board in a SQL database. So that was the client's requirement. Uh, the data was used for other internal applications by the client. So hence they wanted a custom integration to be built between Monday.com and their app. So basically there are a couple of ways in integrating monday.com with a .NET Core API. So one option that monday.com provides is the ability to integrate using a webhook. So I have logged into my monday.com account, and as you can see, so I'm trying to integrate this particular board which is called construction projects, and getting these data that is available in this board and saving them in my database. So basically when you the first approach that when you search online, what you get is the use of webhooks. So if you go to integration center and search for webhooks, so basically you can create a webhook to any of the recipes, what these are called as recipes, and select any recipe where monday.com will inform you or inform your API endpoint automatically when a change happens in any of your board, any of the items in a board actually. So if you want to add a webhook, you just select whatever the recipe that you want, and then you can provide the URL, and there is a certain steps that needs to be followed afterwards, and then once the URL is confirmed, you're basically good to go. So monday.com will definitely call your API as soon as some change happens in your item in the board. uh, but the problem with that approach is that it works fine, but the only thing there is, then from a security perspective, I did not find any way on how to secure my endpoint there, because once I secure, there is no way of telling monday.com, um, hey, you need to pass in this username or password, or this you have to use this authentication mechanism in order to push the data to me. So 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 in order to overcome that situation, so I found there's another approach called the apps framework, which is also provided by monday.com. So so I tried to build this integration using the apps framework. So let's get started. So before we begin, I have done some background work. So I have created the backend API for this. So I just so until it loads, I'll just run through what I'm trying to do. So to give you a brief introduction as to the board that I'm trying to integrate, so basically there is this projects board where we have certain projects, and it has three columns: the status, the start date, and the end date of the project. And the status is like a multi drop down where you can select whatever the status you want. And so we will be bringing this data uh, to a SQL table which is called project. So as you can see, I have already created this SQL table. So it has the same column as in the board except for the project ID. So this project ID is basically the ID on monday.com side, so that for any later in communication with the monday.com API, I would require this project ID. So basically the project ID is nothing else than, so basically how monday work is, this is a board. So every item that is created on the board has something called an item ID. So it is basically the unique ID in this board for each of these item. And so this item ID is what is referred as project ID in my context. So I'll be mapping that item ID onto the project ID. So if I look at the integration, so if you can go to this URL, I think it pretty much explains on how you can integrate with your own API. So for this, I will be using a custom action where whenever some event happens in the board, it will automatically call my API, notifying me any changes that I happened in the my board in any item of my board. So so basically so what I will be have done is, so I have created three API methods. One is to for creation of an item. So when item is created on the board, to notify me, so that is that endpoint. And then the second one is updating of a name. So when I say updating of a name, it means that the item name is being updated. So for that, I have created a separate endpoint. And then so the this particular update method is to update any other column that is being updated in this particular board. So why I can't get this in one go? So as per the documentation, so when you define building custom actions, uh, so so you have to when you so I'm going with the built-in triggers, which is provided by monday.com. So when you say built-in triggers, so there are certain triggers that are available via monday.com app framework. So I'll be using when item is created, item is updated, and any column changes. So in each of these built-in triggers, so they have defined what are the inputs to the trigger and what are being output to the trigger. So whatever that is being output by the trigger will be the input to the custom action that I'm going to write, and those input items is being outputted to my API. So that's how the integration is going to work. So so I will just explain to you how this API and all happens. So as I said now earlier, in the webhook approach, there was no way of like authenticating the request. So but in this app framework approach, what happens is, I will show you in a few minutes. So once you we create an app in the app framework, so the app gets a secret key. So you can get the authentication header, and then you can decode the JWT token that is coming in the authorization header, and then you can get the token decoded. So so you once you get your token decoded, means you know that it is coming from monday.com. And you can also have your own validations here implemented here to verify the token as well, right? So first and foremost, so let's build the API, so the sorry the app in monday.com. So what you have to do is so this is a free account that I have created to test this scenario out. So you can also create a free account here. And so first you click on your user icon here and go into developers. So that's where you can create a app, and just click on create app. I'll just give a name for my app, and these are the credentials that will be used. So so as I said earlier, so the monday.com will be signing the JWT token using the sign in secret, and that can be used in our API in order to uh, decode the token. So so I'll just copy that out, copy it, then I will paste it in my code. I'll just walk you through in a few minutes. Okay, let me paste that. Right, so let's get that ready, and then just save the app. Okay, so once you create your app, in order to create an integration, so you have to create something called a feature. So you click on this create feature button. So out of this I will be selecting the integrations, and then from here I will be starting from scratch. Okay, so in this concept what they have is you need to create a recipe. So a recipe is basically telling what should happen in terms of an event that is happening in a board. So before we create a recipe, we need to define a workflow block. So this is where I'm going to define my custom action. So I will create a new action. So here I will give a name. I'll say uh, create project. I'll say notify create project, and then I'll just copy this. And from a field point of view, so if when you go to the documentation, they say when item is created, the trigger input is the board ID and trigger will be outputting these values. So we only get the item ID and a board ID, user ID and e-stop group, so we don't get the name or anything of that item. So in order to do that, we have to call back the monday.com graph API. So I will show that how it's been done. And so this item ID is basically a unique ID that is for the item that was created in the board. So what I will do is I will only output the I will select item from here, so that it will select item ID, and the source for this is be the trigger output. So then I will edit here, then I need to build my sentence. Let's paste the same thing which I gave as the name, and this is the place where I configure the API endpoint where monday.com should call when a event happens for this recipe. So what I will do is I will fire up my API, um, and then once I fire up my API, I have already set up ngrok, so it needs a https endpoint. So in order to have run ngrok to point towards my localhost API that is going to invoke by monday.com. So um, and yeah, so the API is running. So if it's very simple how you can set up ngrok, and so you just go to ngrok and then download it, and then unzip and register it, and finally you can get a https URL pointing at your localhost via using ngrok. So what I'll do is I'll copy this. It's already up and running, so I'll just copy the URL, and then I'll go to my so I go back to monday.com, so just paste it, and then my API endpoint is called API slash project slash create. Okay, so I'll create my action. Okay, so my action is created now, and then I will go into recipes, and now I will create a recipe. So my trigger is when item is created, so I'll select that, and my action is the custom one which I was built, so notify create project. So for the item ID, so I will select the item ID which is being output by this trigger, and then I will create the recipe. So my recipe is now created. So if I go back, I can see that this recipe is being created. um, right, so you can see that. So now we have to connect this recipe onto our board. So in order to do that, so we'll click on this, go back, navigate back to the board, and then we will click on the integrate option here, and then from here you can scroll down and search for the app that you created. So I'll select on that and it will show me the recipe. So I'll just say add to board. So when an item is created, notify create projects as a recipe. So I will add it to the board. So it is on, and so if my API is running and I put a breakpoint here, okay, and my ng rock is up and running. So if I create an action item here now, say test project 1 2 3 and press enter, so there is no save button or anything. As soon as you hit enter, it saves it, and then you can see my create endpoint is called and it is passing me the item ID. I'll just run through the code, and so basically it is creating I'm getting the authorization header. So I just run through the code after the execution. So so it's always monday.com is making you a post request, and so that's why the methods are, all of the methods, even the updates, are decorated as http post. So this create again happens because I did not respond. There is a time window that needs to be uh, that monday.com tells that you need to respond during that period, otherwise it will retry, assuming that the request got failed. So if you go here, um, there is a location, it says I'll come back to that in a while. Yeah, it's in custom action. So yes, so here, yeah, you have a 1 minute window to call back, I mean to send the response back, otherwise monday.com will periodically keep on being sending you the project. So okay, it seems that, so if I see the project table now, okay, seems we have a problem. Let's see what happened. Yeah, okay, there is a exception, I think, that was thrown by monday.com. That's why it keeps on sending it back. So if I go to the error, what it says is that I don't have permission. It says that I'm using a third-party library. So it permission denied. Your token doesn't grant access to board reads. Okay. So in order to walk you through that, so let's go to the code. So basically, what happens is, first of all, I get the authorization header via the token, and then once the token is received, so I get this. I go to get authentication token, and in the get authentication token, yeah, so what it does is it will decode the token using that secret, and in this token, in order to call back monday.com graph API, the token it is sending a claim which is called short-lived token, where you can use that particular token in order to call back the monday.com API. So so this is what I get from this function, and then I'm just printing out the raw text, and then I have implemented a method called get project async. So which basically does is there is a monday client nugget package that I have installed. So if you go to nugget packages, so you know the jwt package is called jwt version 10 in this recording I'm using, and then monday.client.v2 is the nugget package which is used to call the monday graph API. So I'm passing that API key which was taken from the claim, and then creating a client object, and then passing the item ID, which is the ID of that particular item record that was created in the monday.com board, in order to get the item details. So, and then I'm returning that back to the calling function, and then I'm populating the entity, and also I'm retrieving the status here, because this status is having a default value which is called to be started. Every item that is created has this value, so I can retrieve that. So basically this status, and I'm adding it to the project table, and then saving my changes. So I have already done the EFCO migrations and the table. So the error that we are getting was that we don't have permission in order to access the board. So that is boards.read permission, or the scope was not provided. So in order to do that, what you have to do is you have to go to your app back again, and then go to auth, and then in boards read, so you can give it permission, and you can save the feature. Right, and then if you try so I'll just for clarity I will just delete this project. Yeah, so, and I will rerun the API. Okay, so now what happens is it's there is a queue behind the monday.com, so it is resending me those value. So if I'll go through this, so that the request succeeds. So now if you can see, there is no error that is been uh, thrown from the API, so we can see the value created here. So since I have deleted this, so I'll just uh, delete it again. Sorry. Right, so what we'll do is we'll create another project, so we'll call it test 1 2 3 4. Okay, hit enter. Now your API is being called. Now no errors. So as you can see, if you go and click on, you can see that now that project is being created in your SQL database. So this project ID is basically the item ID. So how I get the item ID is that the request that is coming in. So if you can see, there is inbound sorry, input fields, so in there you can get the item ID. So that's how I'm getting the item ID. So you go to, there is a helper method that I have written. If I go to this method here, so basically it's getting extracting that item ID from the JSON object that is being sent in the request. Yeah, so the next one was to update the project name. So that is, whenever the item is being updated, how do you update your name? So basically again the same scenario, so you get the auth token, then from there you get the project, is the same code, and then so I'm getting the matching project from the database, and then if it is not null, using that project ID, which is the monday.com's item ID, or the ID in this case, and then I'm updating the new project name, and then updating the project. So how do we create the recipe for this? So basically you have to go back to your app, go to developers, click on your app, go to your features, and create a new workflow block. So in this time I'll create another action. We'll say notify project name update. Let's copy this, Then again what I require here is the item ID, and the output is from the trigger, so I'll add that. And the sentence is same thing, and then the API configuration. So for that I will copy this and then paste it here, and my endpoint is API slash project slash its name is update name. Okay, so now I will create this action. So action is created, notify project name update. So I'll go into recipes, so create a new recipe. So my trigger now is when item name has changed. So what I will do is I will create notify project name update. Again I will select the item ID which is been output from the trigger, and then create this recipe. Right, so the recipe has been created. Now I'll go back to my board and then click on integrate. So you can see the existing integration, so I'll add a new integration. I'll select my app again, and then this time I'm selecting notify project name update recipe, so I'll add that to the board. Okay, so now what happens is whenever a project update happens, it will be sent to my API endpoint. So I'll just add a breakpoint here again, and then go back to monday.com, and then I'll just make, now at the moment it's test 1234. I'll just update the name, say test integration, hit enter, and it should trigger my API now back again. So now if I go back and see my name, you can see that it has got updated. Right, so very simple. You get the token, you get the monday.com project, and then find it from the database. If it is not null, update the name and then save the changes. And the last one was to uh, the update part of any column that is been updated. I'll have to update. So in my case it's the start and the, these three column status, start date and the end date, and those three has to be respectively updated in the columns in the database. So for that we have to create another recipe. So what I'll do is, again I'll go to developers, click on my app, go in and create a new action custom. So if I'm here, I'll just say notify column change, copy it, and then in this case what I require is the item ID, and I also need the column that has changed. So I'll give the column ID. uh, I can get the value that has changed as well. That is also possible once you can get a value, but in my case I'll be querying using the graph API monday.com in order to get the column type as well as the column name. So here if you go here and you click on built-in triggers, so when any column changes, so there is no way of getting the column name. So in that case what I require is I need the column name specifically, so that I can convert the value that is coming in to the respective type. So what I have done is, so I'll get the auth token, then I get the item ID, which is the unique key for that item which was got updated, and I get the Monday project, and then select if the database is the project there in the database. If so, then I get the column values using the graph API. So if I go inside, so this is a column there is a custom query or I'm calling the graph API basically with a custom query by passing the item ID and the column ID. So it is returning me uh, the the title, the ID, and the text of the column. So the title is the column name, the text is the value of the column. So it will return me a dynamic object here, and then from that I'm extracting using J tokens. I'm extracting the title and the text. So if I'm checking so the title contains the column name, the text contains the value of the column, and in the column name I'm checking whether it is start date. If so, I'm converting that, and if it's end date, I'm converting into a date time. In case if it's the status, I'm directly assigning it the text value and then updating the project details. So for that we are creating the recipe. So for the sentence, I'll just paste what I had, and then the API configuration similarly. uh, just copy this, add it here, and my endpoint is going to be update. So say API slash project slash update, and I will create my action. Did I miss anything? Okay, my action is now created. So I'll go and create a new recipe. So I'll go to create recipe, choose trigger. So my any column changes, what happens is you need to call my notify column change custom action. For item ID, I'll select the item ID which is triggered out, and then the column ID which is been out from the trigger. So I'll create the recipe and I'll go back to the recipe. I can see the recipe is created now. I'll go back to my board and I'll go on, click on integrate and add a new integration. And then click on my new recipe, add it to the board, right? And then I'll just keep a breakpoint here and then try to update the start date of it. Say 11th of Jan, and it will fire off and come into this. Should take some time. Yeah, the call came in. Okay, so breakpoint was hit. So if I continue, you can see a 200 OK going off, and then if we update, select it again, you can see the value that I selected first 11 is also been updated in my database. Okay, so similarly for end date, I will say select March 24th. Again the update happens, and if I execute, March 24th is selected. In case I change the status, so if I say behind schedule, and again my update is triggered, and then if I go to my DB again, so okay, to be started is still there. So let's check why it's not happening. Let's add a breakpoint here. Okay, so what's happening there? Column name, okay, my Visual Studio seems to be stuck. So basically, okay, so it has got updated to completed now. There might be an issue with my whatever the request that came in. I had to troubleshoot that. Unfortunately, Visual Studio is stuck. So anyway, so this is how you integrate with Monday.com. So it's very simple and straightforward, and it has tons of other options as well of getting these field values, and also if they have a uh, in case you want to build a GraphQL query. So if you go to developer mode, they have a very good support for their Graph API as well. So if you go to API playground, and so this is a query that I have used to in order to get the information regarding a column. So basically I'm passing the item ID and the column ID here, and then filtering out the item ID and the column values, and getting only these three values as a result. So this is where I'm fetching the ID of the column, and then the title, and then the text which the user has selected. So hope you guys enjoyed this video, and please leave a comment if you like, and hit the like button as well. Okay, thank you very much all. Have a great day. Bye.